here was called by whom? God, precisely. So the call is God's. Once one enters into an estate, such as marriage, even though one enters into it voluntarily, one is now seen as being in that estate by God's call, command, and blessing, and so one is not free to depart from it. Remain in the calling into which you were called by God, is the idea here. So think about the 10th commandment in the small catechism. The 9th and 10th commandments go together. You shall not covet your neighbor's house. 9th commandment and the 10th commandment, you shall not covet your neighbor's wife. Is manservant or maidservant, also don't do anything that belongs to your neighbor. The explanation then tells us that we should not entice or force away our neighbor's wife, workers, or animals, but urge them to what? Stay and do their duty, precisely. So, remain in the calling into which you were called. We don't try and pull someone out of their calling, but we urge them to stay and be faithful in their calling. So we have call of the gospel, we have occupation, work that a person does, call to the preaching office, and then a calling that pertains to your relationships in life. Note the plural there. We're going to come back to that idea. So Luther uses two different terms, and he tends to use them in a distinct way. Not always, but generally speaking. The one term, Stand, which we can translate as station or office, applies to everyone's work, whether Christian or non-Christian. Everyone is in a Stand, at least one. And then we have Beruf, which is the German term here, calling, referring to the Christian's earthly or spiritual work. Now today we're just concentrating on his earthly work. So this is seen as being uniquely applied to the Christian. Luther uses these terms, which could be seen as synonyms in this distinct way. Everybody understands the idea of station or office, or at least they ought to, but the Christian sees this particularly as a calling that bears on his life, a calling from God. Now, are there then occupations or positions that are not a roof in a true sense, a calling from God in a true sense? In other words, are people in stations or occupations that are not really callings from God?
Yes.
Can you give me an example?
Card shark.
Yeah. No, that's fantastic. And so in the broader category of gambling and cheating and gambling and so forth. Right. We could think of other occupations that, let's say that one is a dealer of illegal drugs, or a professional thief, or a prostitute, or a dancer in a strip club, or something like this. These are they're occupations in the sense that a person can make their living from them. This is how they occupy their lives, but God has not called them to this. This is not a calling from God. Luther spends, and Luther is in a terribly different context than we are, Luther spends quite a bit of time talking about monasticism as a false beruf. It is seen as being the premier beruf, the premier calling from God, but it is in fact not a proper calling, not a true calling. It is in fact sinful. And so monastic vows are contrary to God's commands, and not only can they be broken, they must be broken, Luther would say. Now what about monasticism would make it a false or a sinful beruf? False or a sinful calling? Paul?
I was thinking, have you ever seen the Cadfael series?
I read a lot of the books, and I don't think I've seen all of them, but yeah, quite good stuff.
There was one episode that revolves around a man abandoning his wife to go become a monk.
Yes.
And sort of the tragedy that
That's an excellent
evolves
example.
thereof. But
So abandoning the family to become a monk. This seems monasticism to be this higher calling. It's exalted as a way to please God and really serve God. But in fact, if he wanted to serve God, he should have
Stayed with his family.
Yeah.
And raised his kids.
Right, precisely. So you have this issue of abandoning a family. What particularly pertains to monasticism? Celibacy. And while some are given the gift of celibacy, most are not. And so to enter into this station that goes against man's nature, as well as the ordinary command that is upon a person to marry. This then is an abrogation of a true beruf, a true calling, for a kind of false one. And the particular problem here is not the chastity or celibacy, but rather the permanent vow that one has entered into this permanently, and then this gets to the issue of vows, that by this vow and by this activity, one is gaining merit or favor before God. So Luther saw this as being contrary to man's nature, contrary to God's institution of the family, as well as problems with the theology of justification, that one is going to merit something before God by this altogether false beruf. So he says, now, if one has the gift of celibacy, and one can remain in the monastery, both praying to God and serving neighbor by serving both brothers in the monastery or sisters in the convent and people in the community, then that is permissible. But that's not the ordinary. That's not the ordinary call upon most people. So what applies to a person's beruf, what applies to a person's calling, is the commandments. That's where we will find out what life pleasing to God is. Do the commandments. So there is no secret, mystical kind of calling upon your life that you need to search out and discern. Look at the commandments. Look at where you are in life. Do the commandments. That's how we find out what our calling in life. Okay, quotation from Vingren. A vocation is a station which is by nature helpful to others if it be followed. A vocation is a station which is by nature helpful to others if it be followed. The purpose then of the station is to be helpful to others. We have occupations then, and then we have biological orders. What are biological orders? Family structure, precisely. So the condition of your biology has put you into a circumstance that begins through birth. You have been brought into a relationship with mother and father, and, if they exist, siblings. So right there you have callings. And what commandment then would apply to that calling? The fourth, principally, the fourth commandment, honor your father and your mother. So you have a biological calling. You have siblings. You're going to have extended family, grandparents, cousins, aunts and uncles, these kinds of things. So you also are put in relationship with these people as your nearest neighbors. Then as life goes on, you continue to have biological callings that change, that one who is a child with this relationship to parents grows, enters into a new family by means of holy marriage, and then has relationship with a spouse. This marriage produces children, and now one has relationships to these children as well. So the child becomes the parent, and these biological orders continue throughout life. And this is the chief calling upon a person's life, which has, we could say, even more foundational element to one's life than even one's occupations. One thing that Vingren doesn't discuss in this first chapter, but that we should also, I just want to mention here for the sake of completion, is that there are also civil orders. That is, that one is born as a citizen of a particular land, well, not always a citizen, I guess, pertaining to the particular laws of the country, but one is born under the laws of a particular land and put then into a relationship with the governing authorities and structure in this place. So we also have a calling with respect to our government. This also falls under the fourth commandment to obey the other authorities, to serve them well. Now, if one finds himself, it's finding oneself, but if you're in a station that is sinful, Mary's card shark, for example, then one is obligated to leave the station, to no longer be in that station. So this, you can imagine a person who is coming to the Christian faith, has been living in a station that is corrupt or sinful. This could also pertain, I think, to a kind of false biological order, if you will. Say a person who is cohabitating, hasn't entered into holy marriage, but is living in a kind of family well, then enter properly into the station that you are to be in. So leave the station that is sinful, or correct and remedy it so that there is the proper kind of calling. Now, before God, you stand alone. But in this life, in the earthly realm, man always stands in relation to neighbor. Our desire is to go off and be by ourselves, to live for ourselves, to serve ourselves, to let that be our religion. But our callings, our stations, put us in relationship to others. So a Christian then occupies multiple stations at the same time. Give me an example of how this works. Who wants to tell me what their stations are? Yes.
I'm a wife.
You're a wife.
I'm a mother.
You're a mother.
I'm a sister.
Sister.
I'm an aunt.
Aunt.
Grandmother.
Grandmother.
I'm a sister.
Your parents still alive?
What?
Are your parents still
No,
alive?
my parents. I was going to say that I'm still a daughter of my parents.
Well, you always remain their daughter, but there's not a whole lot of obedience that's happening if there ever was.
I'm a niece.
Okay.
I'm a cousin.
So lots of these, and it can be challenging to juggle all of these and to put them in their proper order and priority. Not everybody needs the same thing from you, but you're pulled in a lot of different directions, right? And then there are also other callings that pertain to civil society, to be a citizen, to obey the laws of the land, occupation, and so forth. Yeah, good. So we often occupy multiple offices at the same time. Now, here's a quotation from Luther that is extremely significant. All stations are so oriented that they serve others. All stations are so oriented that they serve others. But we go now this way and now that. In other words, we don't serve others in the station the way that we ought to. So, these failures of vocation reveal the difference between God and man. God is known for, we could almost say God is defined by his self-giving. The very action of creation is the self-giving of God. As I have often said to you, Irenaeus said, God made man in order that he might have someone on whom to bestow his benefits. God made man in order that he might have someone on whom to bestow his benefits. God is love, St. John says. God is known for his self-giving love. God doesn't create man, as the Calvinists would have it, for the purpose of man glorifying God. Certainly man should glorify God. But the purpose of God's creation of man is not so that he can have someone to praise him, but so that he can have someone to give his gifts to. God is love. God is self-giving, self-donating. He bestows his benefits upon the other. What does man do? Man is selfish. Instead of living his life for the purpose of self-giving, man is egocentric. He desires what is to his own advantage. That confession mirror that I have given to some of you asks the question pertaining to the first commandment, you shall have no other gods. Have I measured everything by what pleases me? Have I measured everything by what pleases me? I like to ask people who come to me and want to get married, I'll say, why do you want to get married? And what do they say? What's the first thing they say?
We're in love.
We love each other. And what do they really mean by that?
Love me.
And I like the way that it makes me feel. I enjoy the experience of being with this person. We love each other. But usually, there hasn't been a whole lot of biblical love that is really going on. The station is going to flip that around and say, you who desired to experience good benefits from your neighbor instead are now going to be called into this kind of self-giving, self-donating, anti-egocentric sort of love. So, husbands and wives do not, every day and hour, serve each other out of a spontaneous heart of self-giving love, but they're put into a station which compels it, which demands it. So the selfish human heart is going to be compelled to yield, and this is often going to happen. We're not going to say, well, okay, now I see that this is how I ought to do, but rather, life is going to go better if I begin to serve my neighbor. Even though I don't really want to, I would prefer to simply be served. Life will be smoother if I begin to do this. Things will go better. Hence, Leo, you have at times quoted it. What's your philosophy for marriage?
Happy wife, happy life?
Right. Happy wife, happy life. If she is happy, then I will be happy. Or seen as more of a threat, really, than a statement. My mother had a little thing up in the kitchen that said, if Mama ain't happy, ain't nobody happy. So we begin to realize that life will be better if there is less friction in the household. And so the station is forcing us, it's against our will, to begin to cooperate, to begin to get along. And then when babies come along, what do? They mess it all up. They mess that all up. Well, what is that? Does the baby really care if you're sleeping? No. No, not at all. He is going to cry. Now, when he demands food or some mysterious thing that you can't figure out what it is that he wants. I'm just speaking in the abstract. But so there is this demand to serve the neighbor, really against your will. But at some point you do it not out of love, but simply, please, baby, be quiet. Please, can you please go to sleep? So you are compelled to serve the neighbor, not because you want to, but almost then out of your own self-interest. You're forced to serve the neighbor because this is the only way through the problem. This is the way that Vingren put it. At work in marriage, you can say larger than in family, at work in marriage is a power which compels self-giving to spouse and children. So it is the station itself which is the ethical agent. It is the station itself which is the ethical agent, for it is God who is active through the law on earth. So God, having put you into the station of husband or wife, father or mother, brother or sister, has now compelled you to begin to serve the needs of the neighbor. The station becomes the means by which God is producing love and order and good things upon the earth. If left to ourselves, we would only serve ourselves, but God has put us into these stations so that we will be compelled to serve the neighbor. So, what's God doing in the family? The vocations of family, God is sustaining creation. What is the natural outcome of marriage? Children. That's the natural outcome of marriage. not really on the topic, but just pause for a moment and think then about the idea of contraception. What is contraception? Against conception. We are against conception. So what has happened is that entering into the station, which has as one of its goals procreation, one has then said, I will contravene the natural order of this station. Why? So that, not always, there are sometimes other reasons, but generally speaking, because we have decided that this is not how we are going to live our lives at this point. So the natural ordering of the station becomes perverted or corrupted. But the natural outcome then is children, and what is the people like to use the term reproduction today, but a better term instead of reproduction is procreation. So what's happening in the bearing of children is the ongoing work of creation, that God, through father and mother, is continuing his work of creation. And what then is the life of father and mother going to be oriented towards after the child comes? The child.
Bringing up the child.
Raising the child. So now the obligation of father and mother becomes primarily feed the child, raise the child, teach the child, clothe the child, protect the child. So there is a reorienting of the life of father or mother towards the ongoing work of creation in the world. And so this child, who is protected from in the womb and then from infancy, coming all the way then to his own marriage or her own marriage, and then procreation. There is this pattern and there is a momentum towards the ongoing survival of the human race. We could speak in the sort of in the generic, or the ongoing work of he who was once made in the image of God, of Adam, that God's work then goes forward. So all the other good and noble vocations serve this outcome as well. We have a teacher, that is to say a schoolmaster or a tutor, for the purpose of helping the parent teach the child. So the teacher stands in loco parentis, in the place of the parent, to assist the parent with the parent's work. It's the parent's work to teach the child, to train the child, but it's an awful lot of work. It requires a great deal to be able to teach the child all the things that need to be done. Plus, besides not only caring for the child, you also have... What did you say to me? I don't know if you remember it, Mark, but I have thought of it every day since then. When you brought me that swing, thank you for that so much, the swing and the bassinet. You said the great value of the swing is what?
It gives you time to yourself as parents.
Yeah. And your specific words is, so you can do other things. That's what I really remember. Mark saying, this is so great, this swing. It allows you to do other things. Now, there are other things that need to be done that are also for the benefit of the child. Like, maybe once in a while you should pay the bills, for example, or wash the bottles, or wash the clothes, or to maintain all the things that need to be done for the maintenance of the home. So we need other people to help us. Teacher is going to help us train up the child. What's the government going to do? What ought the government to do? What did you say?
Protect us.
Protect us, precisely. Protect us from criminals who would invade the home and do us harm or steal the goods of the family, as well as from foreign invaders who would come in. So government also then is to be oriented towards the service of the family. The government is not the parent. The government is not the family. The government should serve the family. It stands in the office of father, but really under father. Yes.
Well, I was going to say, so the vocation itself is ethical. I guess it follows that the application of the station is very proper.
Yes.
So we have a situation here where we have, not that we talk, this department, all sorts of people that are getting married late, if at all, or, having children, whatever. what this means is you end up with a society where people are less bound to each other
Yes.
by these ethical stations, and things are disintegrating.
Yes, exactly right. And we can see that happening all around us, that we are less bound to each other. And then you couple that with an extremely mobile society where even the people to whom we are bound may live thousands of miles away, and we have difficulty properly relating to them. Yeah, that's a recipe for absolute breakdown of the family, and thus ultimately of the human race. Pretty serious problem. Yeah, exactly right. So I take up this a little bit in today's sermon, but the redefinition of marriage as something by which my emotional needs are met, as opposed to a way by which I serve my neighbor, has had catastrophic consequences. The real issue is not homosexual marriage, but what is marriage itself. You couldn't have homosexual marriage without having already had the redefinition of marriage around the idea of serving feelings and emotions, meeting my needs. And as long as the needs are met, I'll stay in that station. But as soon as they're not met, I will depart from it and seek my own. So, what particularly becomes problematic for some Christians, you had this being addressed both in the early church as well as in Luther's day. Can a Christian be a soldier? Luther actually wrote a treatise on that. Can a Christian be a soldier? Now, one might think, and you could make it cursory. It ends up being a bad argument, but you could make an argument based upon Holy Scripture that says a person ought not to be a police officer or a soldier or something like this. Why? What are you going to be called to do in those offices? Kill or harm, precisely. And the Bible says, "Thou shalt not kill." And so, how can you be in a station that goes against the seeming commandment of God? Well, the commandments apply to us as individuals. The station is the ethical agent. So, the station, it is not given to me to apprehend a criminal, to execute a criminal, to imprison a criminal. It is not given to me to go and wage war against some other nation, or go hunt down Al-Qaeda terrorists or something like that. It is not in my office, but there are those who have the office, and through the station of soldier or police officer, through the station of judge or hangman, God is acting in those stations. It is not my place to take the life of another human being. Indeed, I am commanded not to. But there are those who are in that station. They themselves are not doing it, but the station is acting as God's instrument for wrath, God's instrument for judgment. And the principal teaching on this would be in Romans chapter 13, where it says that the governing authority, the king and the emperor, does not bear the sword in vain. He is an instrument of God in bearing the sword. So the individual is not free to take the life of another. However, the executioner, the hangman, is. God is performing that through that. So the Sermon on the Mount teaches us to not resist evil. Turn the other cheek. The one who oppresses you, allow him to oppress you even more. That does not apply to government. That applies to the individual. So, does that make sense to everybody? Question?
And
And then I'll take you, yeah.
well, I was saying, getting back to the whole modern concept of marriage as feelings then. So, what would the teaching be on someone who feels that he is in a vocation that they don't like, which is legitimate, but they don't like? They feel bound in ways that
Are you speaking about a biological?
It could be either. It could be, say one spouse has bad feelings towards the other, or the modern tendency where people deny their biological They say, okay, I don't feel like a man or a woman anymore, I want to become the other
Right.
sex.
It's a very, I think I read something about a prisoner in Massachusetts who is going to be allowed a taxpayer-paid.
Well, that sort of
sex change
thing's happening all the
operation.
time.
But the,
How do we respond to these people that say, I don't feel like being in this vocation anymore?
I don't think that there is, if you could find the person on earth who is absolutely happy all the time in all of his biological offices, which is to say, never has any problem with father or mother, with spouse or child or sibling, that person would surely be the happiest person on earth, and I think we would have found heaven at that point. The very purpose of the station, the ethical purpose of the station is to be oriented to serve the neighbor, but there is a theological purpose for us, which is that it teaches us to bear the cross. That it is precisely at those moments when you don't like it, when you really don't like your parents or your spouse or your child or your sibling. It is exactly at that moment, and the last thing you want to do is to serve them. That now God is really doing His work in you because He is teaching you to love and to love sacrificially, to, if you will, to set aside your feelings, to set aside your ego, the desire to serve self, and compelling you to serve your neighbor. It's exactly when you don't like it that God is, if you will, most working on you. So far from, being, well, this isn't working anymore. I don't like my marriage, or I don't like this child. Let's take it back. Something like this. No, you cannot do this. You have been called into the station for the purpose of being oriented to the other person. I used to think that it was Pope John Paul II who said it in that encyclical, The Gospel of Life. But I once reread the book specifically for the purpose just of finding this quote, and I never did find it, so maybe I read it someplace else. But the statement was this: God gives children to women in order to teach them how to love. And I think the same could be said of all the biological stations. God gives us a spouse in order to teach us how to love. God gives us parents in order to teach us how to love. God gives us children in order to teach us how to love. He puts us precisely in the place where we maybe aren't going to be so comfortable or so happy about it, so that we can learn this is what it means. This is what it means to love. Good. All right. So, creation, that is to say, everything else in creation besides human beings, creation judges and condemns us because it reveals. Everything else carries out its station properly. Luther uses the example of the bird. The bird sings every morning, even though he doesn't know where his food is coming from. He just does what is given to him to do. And then God supplies us. But what do we do? Instead of thinking sort of spontaneously and naturally, how may I carry out my station? How may I carry out my vocation? I think about, how am I going to grab hold of, keep what pleases me, or what I want, what I desire. So I think about either maintaining or getting more of what I want, as opposed to, wow, God has given me all this stuff. How may I serve my neighbor with it? So we are intrinsically oriented towards the self, and this is where our anxiety comes from, because instead of trusting that God will provide our daily bread, we worry about our daily bread, and then beyond that, we have desire for things that go beyond daily bread, not just what I need, but what I want. Well, now then, also in creation is the idea that the multiple stations compel us to live together and to work together. God doesn't drop a shirt down out of the sky, or He doesn't cause a shirt to grow up out of the ground, but rather He gives a sheep. And on the sheep is the wool. And so what are we going to need? We're going to need someone to care for the sheep. We're going to need someone to protect the sheep, to feed the sheep. Then we're going to need someone to shear the sheep. We will have to card the wool. We will have to spin the wool. It'll have to be woven together or sewn together into cloth. We're going to need somebody to transport it, till finally the one who needs the shirt gets the shirt. So all the various stations have to work together to provide the things that are needed for the neighbor. Thus, the stations compel us to live together and to work together in love. Think about bread. Ask somebody, where do you get your bread? And they will say, Safeway, or Giant, or Whole Foods, or something like this. But the bread does not come from there. That's where we pick it up. But it comes up out of the ground. Then someone must harvest the wheat. Someone must thresh it. Someone must grind it into flour. Then the flour has to be mixed with other ingredients, which also have been gathered together and drawn up out of creation, so that they can then be baked, packaged, shipped, and then finally purchased and eaten. A tremendous amount goes into a simple piece of bread. All the stations must work together. That's then the purpose also of the stations, is to orient us towards the neighbor. And all of the varying things in creation show us that there are a variety of stations into which we could. Many of you could probably have done many different things in your life. Perhaps you are naturally suited towards a particular kind of station, or perhaps you were suited to it because that's where you were born, or that's what you kind of seemingly fell into. But there are minerals in the mountains, there are fish in the streams and in the ocean, there's fruit in the ground, and so all of these different places and all of these different products require different kinds of stations among men. The last thought then of Luther for this topic is that it's not really the farmer who milks the cow, it's God who is milking the cow through the farmer. So the same thing that Luther would say about baptism. The pastor doesn't baptize, rather God baptizes through the hand of the pastor. The same thing applies to the cow. It is God who is milking the cow. So God is the one who is acting. And this means that no station is ignoble. Whether one is a king or a custodian, every station is valuable. And every station is God acting to serve the neighbor. And that should make us treat differently than we ordinarily would other people. We tend to regard people well whose stations make them exalted in society or whose stations cause them to be very well paid. And somebody whose station seems to be less, not very proud or noble, we tend to think less of that person. But God serves us just as much. Maybe we should say God serves us quite a bit more by the guy who picks up our trash or maintains our sewer, as opposed to the person who made millions of dollars in the last feature film. Which station really serves the neighbor more? God is exalted in the custodian. God is working in the custodian. And maybe I take delight in somebody who can throw a fastball right on target at 100 miles an hour. But maybe that's not the most noble station. Maybe the person who runs the mob has a much more noble station, a station that serves the neighbor far more. Yeah.
I was going to say, you recommended a while back that God created Walter.
Right.
Yeah. It's a daily devotional, and actually in yesterday's reading, correctly addressed this.
Did he?
Yeah, and he specifically says that, obviously God doles out gifts in a very balanced way. Some people have very modest gifts, they're all, for some people are even impaired, and then some people have great gifts. But it really is a balance here where you go with humble gifts. You have to serve those, who have greater gifts. Mm-hmm. And those who have greater gifts, have to understand that they have to be careful and take care of those people that are less fortunate and less blessed. I don't know, he compared it to the metaphor, he says it's a body. So you have very distinct parts, that are all working together in concert, and that's the way you should be in the church. And when you're walking, the eye is at the mercy of the foot, and
yeah.
And the other thing to think about in that terms is, obviously, things just serve different functions.
Right.
And in one instance, one function might be incredibly important, in another instance it may not.
Yeah.
So, you can't anticipate, you have to be very humble about what your gifts are.
Yeah.
So,
Very, very well put. We never value our toe until we break it, or stub it, and then we suddenly realize, oh my,
it's pretty useful.
yeah. Leo?
We're not going to finish this today.
No, we just did, actually.
Did we really?
Yeah.
Yeah. Call for the preaching office?
What's that?
We talked about the call for the preaching office?
No, I am, I listed that there at the beginning as sort of the different calls, but that's not part of the topic for today. In this section, we're just dealing with earthly stations and the call to the preaching office. I was thinking about this as well. I read Vingard's book a long time ago while I was in seminary, and so I'm also using this as an opportunity to reread the book. But in a way, the preaching office is treated, if you will, as a spiritual station, not an earthly station. But there's overlap, obviously.
What I wanted to talk about was the Pastor McLean, who you know is a great fan of Benedict XVI.
Yes.
And often talks about how remarkably Lutheran he is. And I wanted to talk, I hope you were going to talk about the way he, in one sense, Lutheranized the papacy by resigning from it, by treating it as an office, and not that you create a pope, and so you can't be uncreated pope, so you must serve in the office until death, because it's a personal office. And when a pope dies, the office almost dies and is resurrected by the College of Cardinals when another pope is invested. But how he resigned from it, showing that it's an office which belongs to the church, and a man occupies it. In one sense, sort of resolving a theological argument in favor of Lutheran theology as opposed to much of Roman theology in terms of the conception of a preaching office. That you create a priest, or you create a bishop, or you create a pope.
Mm-hmm.
Not that there's an office there that belongs to the church, that God created for the exercise of the preaching office among the church.
Right.
That's
right.
what I thought you were going to...
Yeah, no, yeah, and we'll talk more about the preaching office in a future session. Those are very good thoughts. 30 seconds?
30 seconds. When it comes to our biological vocations or callings, so you're to serve in those vocations forever, no matter whether...
Till death us do part.
Okay, so parent to child, even if the child rejects the parent, or parent to child where a child reaches out to a parent and the parent rejects the child, is there a time? Are you just always supposed to turn the other cheek to the person in the biological vocation that is rejecting your service to them in your vocation?
Well, we have to make a distinction
Like you're
between...
estranged from your father. And
Right.
you're constantly-
There's a great difference between a minor child and a child who is of age. Because a parent has authority over a minor child, that it does not when the child becomes an adult. We always have that relationship, and the elder is to serve the younger by means of wisdom and property and these kinds of things, but it does change. But I think that the parable of the prodigal son is always what is in play there. That we are that the father always stands welcoming, waiting for the son to return home, if you will. So that's the best way to speak in the abstract about this. The concrete has, there are so many possible permutations to this that, that's what's called casuistry. How do we address a particular situation? But we do need to go to church, yeah?
You talked about parents who are parents,
Right.
I really think it's still important to follow the Lord's commandment and speak well of them.
For sure.
Including, of course, the people who are younger than to honor their memory.
Yes, certainly,
And that way
yeah.
you're obeying the Lord's commandment, even though they're no longer here.
Sure, yeah, and if you think about it in the larger sense, I mean, to honor those who have gone before us. The church remembers her saints. The church speaks well of those who went before her, and certainly in family we do this as well. I just mean you don't have to obey your parents or even call them once they're dead. You know what I mean? You can't. That's what I mean. Yeah. And in the same way, in marriage, death ends the marriage, and so one is freed from that. Sometimes people, when their spouse dies, they think, well, I would be dishonoring the memory of my spouse or something if I remarry. Well, no, death ends the marriage. Till death us do part. Death, and at that point, that it's concluded. Now, one may never wish to marry, and that's perfectly fine. But you're not committing adultery by remarrying after death. So, anyway, we need to go to church. We will continue the topic for coming weeks. Let us pray. Lord God, Heavenly Father, help us faithfully to fulfill our varied vocations in this coming week, and help us now to receive the vocation which you have established for us in the preaching of the gospel, that we might receive full and free remission of our sins and be strengthened thereby to be faithful towards you and to have love for our neighbor. Through Jesus Christ our Lord.